When I say we're going to use this vegetable from the crown down to the roots, I mean exactly that. Guten gardening, everybody! You know, I'm not exactly sure why broccoli gets such a bad reputation. You see all those commercials about adding cheese to broccoli just to make it palatable. I think broccoli is absolutely delicious. And even though it can be a somewhat unpredictable plant in terms of production of the head, sometimes you get a really nice head of broccoli, sometimes you struggle a little bit with that. You can eat this plant at every stage of life. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up today is because we went on a trip for a couple of weeks, and when we came back, our broccoli had started to sprout. And that means that the nice, firm, compact heads that we would have liked to have harvested weren't there. Instead, they were getting to a point where they were almost ready to start forming those little yellow flowers that are indicative of them going to seed. And that can happen for a number of reasons: the amount of watering that you're doing, the stress from heat. There's a whole bunch of reasons why you may or may not get a good, solid broccoli head. But the nice thing is, we're not just interested in eating the crowns of the broccoli. If that were the case, then we might find a lot of disappointment in these results. But instead, we're looking at this as a no-waste harvest, because we're not just going to eat the crowns of this, we're going to eat the leaves and the stems of this broccoli. Now, broccoli is a great source of dietary fiber, potassium, and a bunch of other nutrients. But one of the things that a lot of people fail to understand is just how much of this plant is edible and at what stages. Because you can start eating broccoli at the point where you sprout the seeds. You can eat broccoli sprouts. They're quite delicious. Actually, I think some of those broccoli sprouts and even broccoli microgreens have almost a stronger broccoli flavor than the adult plant itself. And they are definitely more dense in terms of nutrients. We've grown broccoli microgreens multiple times, and I can tell you, as an addition to salad, as an addition to your diet, that's a fantastic opportunity to get the taste of broccoli within about 2 weeks of planting. But here we are now with our broccoli crowns that are starting to sprout. We're going to cut those off and we're going to eat them. That is not a problem. Again, it's not pretty. It's not as pretty as you'd like with those good, solid crowns. And I will tell you, we've grown plenty of broccoli that has been successful. Sometimes when you go away, though, for a little bit of time, you can end up with results like this. Don't let it go to waste. Don't get discouraged by that, because not only are we eating this broccoli crown, and we're going to prepare it just the same way we prepare any other kind of broccoli that we made. And I'll also tell you, we're still going to soak it in salt water for a little bit to see if there are any critters that want to crawl out of there. You know, those cabbage loopers tend to really like to be inside the broccoli. But we're going to take care of that right away. And then we're going to come back and we're going to take our healthy leaves off. Now, you can harvest all the leaves off of the broccoli. You can even harvest the leaves as the plant is growing. So you don't have to wait to this point to start eating the leaves of the broccoli. If you've ever eaten the leaves off of, I would say, compare it cooking wise, in terms of time wise, I would compare this to cooking kale. The taste is not the same, but the amount of time. If you've ever cooked the leaves off of a kohlrabi plant, that's about the same amount of cooking time. That's what we've found. Now, there are going to be so many broccoli leaves. The bed that I have here is a 3x6 bed. That's not massive, but for the number of plants we have in here, 10 or 12 plants, we've got a ton of leaves, and we're not going to be able to eat them all right away. But just like spinach, just like collard greens, you can come in and blanch and freeze these if you'd like as well, to keep these for longer storage. Now, if you're eating them as the plant is growing, you probably won't need to do that. You could harvest enough for a dinner and then cook them right there on the spot. But again, blanching and freezing is an easy way to preserve the leaves. But our goal is zero waste from this plant. Now, you don't have to pull the leaves off. You don't even have to harvest the rest of the stems at the time that you harvest the crown. Because if you remove the crown, you can still see some florets develop later on in the season. And here's exactly what I'm talking about. You see, we left this plant here, and you can see the little florets that are starting to form all over. Now, you're not going to get much in the way of florets, but that's something to keep in mind if you don't want to eat the rest of the plant right away. And so I want to show you what it looks like once we've pulled all the leaves off this plant, and we're going to prepare those and then we're left with the stem. You can cook that the same way that you'd cook regular broccoli. And similarly, we're going to blanch and freeze the crowns that we don't use right away. You can blanch and freeze the broccoli stems too. You want to be careful with that. You don't want to blanch them too long. We blanch typically for about 30 seconds, but you don't want to blanch them too long because you don't want them to become saturated with the water. That doesn't leave a very good texture when it comes time later on to steam them. You can also flash freeze these if you prefer that method as well. Now, when it comes to eating the stem, we're going to go down all the way to the bottom and cut the stem off. And here's the thing you should know. Right down toward the bottom, especially as the plant gets older, the stem part gets pretty woody. So that'd be pretty hard to eat. So we're going to go down as far as we can on this stem, and there'll be a nice sweet spot. So we can cut it along the way in a couple inch segments. And when that part gets too woody, that can go directly into your compost, your vermiculture setup if you have one for your worm bin. And this is why I'm saying there's zero waste, because even at the very bottom, that woody part of the stem, that's going to go somewhere in the garden to help us for future garden seasons. And if the outside area is too fibrous and too hard for you, you can also peel that part of the stem as well to get to that goodness inside. The longer you wait, the woodier the stem tends to be. And any of the peelings can go right back into your compost. And another thing to keep in mind is if the plant is already going to seed, and you can see we left this one out here to go completely to seed, that's how we're able to collect the seeds for planting again next season. One of the things I want you to see here is that gardening isn't always this beautiful, perfect process, where we end up with this massive broccoli crown. We certainly didn't end up with that in this garden spot, but we still have plenty of food that we can harvest from this. If we're just discarding of what's left after the crown, we are wasting a ton of the food that we need for our family over the winter. So I want to encourage you, if you don't get the results that you want from something that you've grown like broccoli, don't let that discourage you, and definitely look into which parts of the plant are edible, because you may find that there's a whole lot more there to harvest than you initially expected or anticipated or even knew about. And that's the reason why we made this video today. Yes, this looks like a disappointment on the surface, but the reality is that's a ton of food for our family. Well, folks, we hope you found today's video useful and informative. This is one of the things that we can provide to you, opportunities to see where our garden doesn't exactly work the way we want it to in the moment, but how we can turn that into something incredibly beneficial. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.